You've heard of the mind-bending grandfather paradox, right? The time travel thought experiment so paradoxical, so utterly devoid of logic, that it seems to crumble the very foundation of how we understand the nature of causality and the flow of time itself. Well, today, we're not just going to explain this famously confounding paradox. We're going to attempt to solve it once and for all. Let's get started with what exactly is the grandfather paradox with an example. Imagine you had a working time machine that allowed you to travel backward through time. You decide to take a journey to the past, transporting yourself to a point before your paternal grandfather was born. Once you arrive in this bygone era, you somehow inadvertently or intentionally end up causing an event that leads to the death of your grandfather when he was just a young man, long before he ever met your grandmother and started a family. This scenario creates an apparent paradox. If you killed your grandfather before he could meet your grandmother and have children, including the parent who later gave birth to you, then logically, you would never have been born in the first place. But if you were never born, how could you have traveled back in time to kill your grandfather? It's an utterly illogical, self-contradictory situation. The grandfather paradox strikes at the core of causality and the rules of time. If time travel to the past were possible, it opens up reality-breaking paradoxes like this. So how could it potentially be resolved? Solution 1. The self-protecting timeline. One proposed solution is that you physically cannot change the past in any way that would create a paradox like this one. The laws of physics or some deeper metaphysical principle would simply not allow it. Perhaps there is a fundamental cosmic force or law in place that protects the integrity of the timeline from paradoxical alterations. Every attempt you make to alter the past in a way that creates a paradox would be thwarted by a sort of cosmological self-defense mechanism. To use the grandfather example, every single time you tried to kill your grandfather as a young man before he could have offspring, a ridiculous series of wildly improbable and increasingly unlikely events would conspire to stop you at the last second. The gun would jam. You'd inexplicably miss every shot. He'd randomly duck for seemingly no reason at precisely the right microsecond. Some freak occurrence like a bird pooping in your scope at the vital moment, or a random tree branch falling to block your path, would perpetually intervene. The universe would effectively be protecting itself from paradox through increasingly silly coincidences. Solution 2. The block universe. Another interpretation draws from the block universe theory in physics, which states that the past, present and future are all equally real and already exist in an immutable four-dimensional space-time block. Under this view, you can't truly change the past. You'd simply be arriving from a different set of initial conditions in your personal timeline. So if in your timeline and future, your grandfather inevitably lived long enough to have kids and grandkids, any attempt you make to go back and kill him would automatically fail and be physically impossible. Not because of silly coincidences, but because his survival is already an inviolable part of your locked-in timeline and future. You'd have a kind of paradox protection automatically baked into the system. Solution 3. The multiverse interpretation. This proposes that by going back and killing your grandfather, you're not creating a paradox, but rather spawning an entirely new branch reality within a vaster multiverse of parallel universes. From your original universe's view, it would seem paradoxical, but really, you've just generated a new offshoot alternate world, while your initial timeline continues undisturbed. This stems from interpretations of quantum physics that allow for the existence of parallel realities. When you alter the past in a paradox-creating way, rather than creating a contradiction in a single timeline, you're actually splitting off and generating an entirely new universe with a different history and future. In the new branched reality you created by killing your grandfather, you would simply exist from the beginning without your grandfather's lineage. But your initial universe and personal timeline remain intact and paradox-free. This multiverse theory resolves the grandfather paradox by allowing history-altering time travel, but avoiding logical contradictions by spawning new parallel worlds. The paradox is dissolved across an infinite multiverse of realities. On a technical level, this relates to the idea of Deutschian pseudo-realities proposed by philosopher David Deutsch. He hypothesized that paradoxical time loops could be resolved by spawning new semi-classical realms that function as alternate offshoot universes, avoiding contradictions. So in summary, while the grandfather paradox at first seems to break the rational rules of logic and render time travel into the past impossible, there are actually several intriguing theoretical resolutions proposed by physicists and philosophers. Each offers a unique perspective for avoiding the paradox, whether it's the self-defending bulletproof timeline, the block universe model where the past is already sealed, or the infinitely branching multiverse allowing new realities. The grandfather paradox continues to inspire bizarre, reality-bending theories about the true nature of time, causality, and our perceived cosmos. What's your take on this delightfully confounding paradox and its proposed solutions? Let me know in the comments below. And send me your suggestions for what other brain-melting paradoxes you'd like me to explore and try to solve in upcoming videos.